We come today to another strange passage in the Sermon on the Mount. This is the passage that says not to judge. Judge not lest you be judged. What that means is a point of great contention in the church. Does it mean not to have opinions about other people? Does it mean not to have discernment? Does it just mean not to condemn other people? What I love to do whenever I'm studying this passage, or really any passage in the Sermon on the Mount, is to see how fundamentalist preachers try to deny what's right there in front of their face. They think of themselves as taking the Bible literally, but something like "thou shalt not judge" is not something that's very convenient for them, because if they weren't able to judge other people, a lot of them would not know what to say. So this is a fundamentalist preacher talking about our passage today. So he says, Jesus says that we're not to judge. He's not talking about open and obvious sin. He's not talking about judging false teachers. So he's clearly saying Jesus says not to judge, but he doesn't mean not to judge. He says that people that take up the verse that way are using it as a shield for sin. He says this passage does not mean that one needs to be perfect or sinless to help another by pointing out sin and disciplining them to a right standing with God. But it does mean that if you're living purposefully in unrepentant sin, your intentions to confront another over their sin are at least suspect. And my favorite line in the whole sermon is the last line. He goes, "I wish I had more time to discuss this wonderful passage of conviction and hope, but our space here is limited." That's what we, in this job of preaching, think of as our parachute passages, like how you just kind of hope your listener will forget that you didn't address Jesus' point at all. So, what does this passage mean? What does it mean to say, "Judge not, lest you be judged"? It's clearly foundational for Jesus. Jesus is going to be talking about not judging a whole lot. So when I was getting ready to go to bed last night, I was not happy with the sermon at all. And then I got word late last evening that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had passed away, Supreme Court Justice. This wonderful spirit, this incredible advocate for social justice for all people. And of course, that kind of changes your frame. And so as I thought about the passage through the night and thought about, okay, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is a judge. That's her job. She's a judge. But she was a different kind of judge. First of all, she was Jewish. And so her understanding of this passage would be different than most Christian interpretation. In the Christian scripture, the word that's used here is the word we get crisis from. It's krisis, and we think of it as an attitude, as a mental judgment. But for someone of the Jewish tradition, which Jesus was, the word judge referred to those people that before Israel became a kingdom, the judges were the ones that held things together, but people voluntarily came to them. So the idea was not just having an opinion about somebody, but affecting their lives, making decisions on their behalf. I think that this aspect, although I've never seen it treated theologically, it may be, I don't keep up with a lot of that stuff, but I think if you look at this idea of power and put that into the concept, I think it gets closer to the historical Jewish understanding of this word. And what Jesus is talking about makes a whole lot more sense. If what he's saying is, govern not, lest ye be governed. Having attitudes where you not only have opinions about other people. For example, if you're pro-life, that's your opinion. But if you're anti-choice, if you lobby to take away women's reproductive decisions, then that's not just an opinion. That's a judgment in the ancient Jewish sense of somebody who's interfering in someone else's life. If you believe that homosexuality is wrong, that's an opinion. If you lobby so that LGBTQ people cannot get insurance, cannot adopt, that kind of thing, it's not just an opinion. At that point, it's a policy. It's you dominating another person. I would say, oppressing another person. And so I think Jesus may be saying something about the opinions that we have. Obviously, that's the starting place. But I think it's more profound than that. In the Egyptian culture, they had a god who judged human beings by weighing their heart. I think it was Horus. And then put the heart on a scale and weigh the good versus the evil. I think what Jesus is saying is not to put the human heart on a scale at all. That the human heart is the source of value. It's the source of what makes something good or evil. I think for someone like Jesus, and I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg, good and evil are not these abstractions. That you have to know the people affected by this. So your humanity, your life, and nature are ultimate values. You cannot set a price on them. That's the insanity of capitalism. To say that somebody gets medicine or doesn't get medicine because of how much money they have, that they get to live or not live because of how much money they're able to make, is not just an opinion. It is an oppressive power structure. And I think what Jesus is inviting us to do is to not only leave that power structure, but to deconstruct it, starting with our own minds and hearts. So in some parts of the world, they talk about the revolution starts when you decolonize your own mind. So stepping out of the oppressive identities that you have. I think that's why Jesus talks about hypocrisy here. The word hypocrite in Greek is talking about the mask that an actor wears. And whenever we judge another person, we have to pretend that we're better than that. Right? That we have to pretend that we're something more objective, that we are something superior to the human animal. And what Jesus is saying is, we all have the same human traits. We have to learn to love the human animal as we are, with all of the idiosyncrasies and imperfections. I think when he talks about taking the log out of our own eye, if you think in terms of a prejudice, I think the reason Jesus talks about the eye so much in the Sermon on the Mount is he's talking about how we perceive the world. That's where it starts. When we value human beings in terms of an artificial system of value, we've already done something violent and we don't know that. So taking the mask off, not pretending to be objective, and also realizing that the imperfection we see in the other person is also within us. And when it's a personal flaw, when it's a personal prejudice, we're looking out through it. So it becomes a log when it's in my eye, a little speck of white privilege, of male privilege, of Christian privilege. That sense of like elevated perspective becomes an impediment to being able to perceive, to understand other human beings. I think Jesus is saying, don't use an idea of good and evil to evaluate human beings. Use the value of human beings to say what's good and what is evil. In the ancient world, there were legends of a kind of godlike being who, if you've ever heard the word Procrustean bed, he was a very strange person, and he would measure people, he would judge people by how they fit in this iron bed that he had. And if they were too short for the bed, he would stretch them, he would torture them, he would pull on them. And then if they were too tall, he would cut off the pieces that were bigger than the bed. So this is a kind of horrific mythology expressing what we do all the time when we have an artificial value system. In capitalism, this happens all the time. If someone isn't, tall enough, or if they're too tall, you measure by an artificial value system. And what Jesus is saying is that the human being is the value. That humanity and life and nature are ultimate values. If you measure them by anything, you're missing that point. There's nothing more valuable than those are. So I think when Jesus is saying not to judge, I think he's both talking about the inner work that we have to do, but certainly this whole teaching is going to be talking about a kingdom to come, so that it's talking about the beloved community of all of us. How do I have to change personally so that I do not become oppressive in your life? I have to change how I perceive you in order to do that. I have to go through a transformation. And the wonderful thing, and what we learned from Ruth Bader Ginsburg, is then you become an agent of transformation. She, in her own time, faced incredible prejudice, and she didn't live long enough to completely overcome that prejudice. Sexism, patriarchy. But what she did was she made her life a gift to future women coming down, and future men too, that we are hurt by patriarchy as well. But to do that, she took off the mask of objectivity. She was in a position of power, but she didn't use it to dominate. She didn't use it to control. She used it to liberate. And that was the heart of her message. When she talked about feminism, she has a wonderful definition of feminism. She goes, feminism, I think the simplest explanation, and the one that captures the idea, is a song Marlo Thomas sang. Free to be you and me. Free to be, if you were a girl, doctor, lawyer, Indian chief. Anything you want to be. And if you're a boy, and you like teaching, you like nursing, you would like to have a doll, that's okay too. That notion that we should each be free to develop our own talents, whatever they may be, and not be held back by artificial barriers. She says man-made barriers, human barriers, cultural barriers. That whatever holds people back is certainly not heaven sent. So she's using kind of religious imagery there to get her point across. Here's somebody sitting in a seat of great power who is not using it to dominate others. Again, she's using it to liberate them. She is not judging their worth by some abstract idea of good, bad, right, wrong, evil. She's using their humanity as the decoder ring, as the interpreting device for what good and evil mean. She said if she was writing a constitution for the United States, and this is amazing, this is a Supreme Court justice saying, that she would not start with the American Constitution. She said every constitution since World War II has that men and women are equal, but our Constitution doesn't. So she realized that the Constitution was written by white, rich men. And so that is the log that's in the eye of American jurisprudence, American law, that the Constitution starts from that artificial gazing point of the early white Christian males in this culture. So the revolution that's necessary, the transformation that's necessary, is to stop looking through those eyes. So she became a voice for the voiceless from that position of power. She took off the mask that would give her privilege in the culture, became very controversial. And so she became the worst nightmare for patriarchal, oppressive men. But it's really all of us that are affected by oppression. The systems of oppression interlock. And they begin as a trance. We're propagandized into them. So that when the president says that teaching about white privilege, teaching about the history of racism in this country is un-American, that's somebody who's looking through white eyes at other people's lives. They're doing what Jesus said not to do, which is to evaluate other people in terms of what they mean to you and to your systems of good and evil. She was a remarkable person, and I think in many ways she gave her life to illustrate, sometimes comedically, what the American Constitution doesn't illumine. She was once asked, there are 9 Supreme Court justices, when she was the first woman, they asked her how many women would be enough on the Supreme Court, expecting maybe 4 or 5, because it can't be the same. She said 9, and she did it tongue-in-cheek. Her point was, when there were 9 male judges, nobody blinked an eye. In order to get out of that, you have to be able to at least envision women's empowerment and trust enough in that. So I'm really glad that I got the news about Ruth Bader Ginsburg before this morning. I'm very sad that it's happened. I think you know that the possibilities are terrifying of what the power struggle might be to replace her. But I think what can't be lost, what she's given permanently to those with eyes to see, is what Jesus is trying to teach us here today in this passage. That the masks we wear, that we didn't even put them on. They were taught to us before we were able to be conscious, autonomous agents. We were told what it means to be male, what it means to be female, what it means to be American, all of those things. And we judge, evaluate other people within artificial systems of value that always lead us to oppression and to violence until we overthrow them. Jesus is talking about a revolution when he talks about the kingdom. I don't think it's a violent revolution, but it is a revolution. It's a complete transformation of every aspect of culture so that it is calibrated to human value, to human life. And so I was really moved when someone sent me this morning a picture of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, notorious RBG, as she was sometimes called. And it said, "May her memory be a revolution." And I think she would like that very much. And I think Jesus would like that very much. She was Jewish, so she understood the idea of judgment differently than a Greek or someone who's turned Christianity into philosophy. It's not just talking about our opinions of other people when Jesus says don't judge. It's more importantly how we treat each other. And even more important than that, how we value each other. To see human beings and animals and plants and life as these ultimate values is a starting place for the world for which we long. So I think what Jesus is saying is not to try to not have any opinions about anybody, but to use whatever privilege we have to liberate others and not dominate them. To use whatever power we have not to control others, but to set them free. I invite you now to your own reflection on these words. We'll have a minute. I think it's a picture of an ocean maybe today. I could be wrong. But whatever that picture is, whatever the moment is, think about 60 seconds can seem like so long when we stop and meditate. But we need to slow our lives down. So I invite you to step out of your worries, your concerns, your judgments, and to spend this next minute in a joyful interconnection with whatever the source out of which we all come and live and return. Be in peace.